Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Finance Board meeting for Wednesday, June 12th, 2024. Call the meeting to order at 6:02 PM. The first item on the agenda is to welcome the new member of the Finance Board, Adam Haywood. He was appointed on Monday evening. So Adam, I don't know if you just want to give a quick introduction and
So yeah, I'm already messing up. So I've been a resident in town for 12 years. Some of you may know me. I ran for selectman unsuccessfully. But during my candidate's night speech, I said that I'd find a spot on a board. So here I am trying to do my part to offer whatever expertise I can. And, you know, really looking forward to working with the team.
great, we're happy to have you. And then just on top of that, just an update on recruitment. As of right now, we do have a full 7-member board with the 2 alternate spots open. In conversation with Alex, he may be looking to switch over to an alternate spot, so I'm talking to him and just figuring out what he wants to do. So that way we can have Rebecca make all the necessary appointments for the select board later this month. So the next item on our agenda is a request from the Council on Aging regarding the bylaw changes that they had proposed in the warrant this past year that ultimately were removed from the warrant. I know that the select board also discussed this, and they have agreed to have a member of the board meet with the Council on Aging to just go through and discuss the background behind what their requests were, what their intentions were. And they also asked that a member of the Finance Board also be part of just that discussion. It would be nothing in terms of like making a concrete decision as to what was and wasn't acceptable. That would still have to go through the regular process. This is just to have an open dialogue with them to get some of that background information. Rebecca, I'm speaking correctly on that, right? Okay. So what they're looking for is someone who would take the time to meet with them. So I don't know if there's anyone who would like to volunteer to do that. Okay, Jim volunteered. I don't think we need to really vote on that, do we? I think.
To select a member to represent the
Yeah.
committee, yes.
We would need to vote. Okay, so with Jim volunteering, I'll make the motion to have Jim have that conversation on behalf of the Finance Board.
I'll second that motion.
Perfect. Any other discussion on that? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
I'm the only one that's qualified.
All right, so then the next item on the agenda is just looking at the end of fiscal year 2024, including any transfers according to the information that Ellen provided, which I've included in your packets. Everything appears to be going in line with kind of the expectations. And as of right now, there are no additional budget transfers that have been requested. So I know that she had mentioned in her email just that as the budget season wrapped up and numbers became more finalized, she would have an idea as to what the free cash might be at a future meeting. So I don't know if anyone had any questions or wanted to add anything. We're good.
I'd say no news is good news because we are trending according to plan, that means.
Correct. All right. The next item on the agenda is for the fiscal year 2026 Pentucket Regional School District budget process. being the largest percentage of our budget. And, you know, over the years, we've gotten to work better with the school committee, but there's still some gaps that we can work on in terms of their understanding of how their budget plays into our budget. Also, us understanding some of the formula and how that factors in. So we wanted, I know Ruth had mentioned, she just wanted to have a conversation about how we could approach this next, not this next fiscal year, but the one after that, so the next budget season, with them to just continue to build and improve on the process that we have so far.
Right. Do you want me to elaborate on what I was? So we have a new member of representing Groveland on the school committee that was actually a write-in this year because there wasn't anybody running for that slot. And, you know, we tend to be reactive to the budget because there's so many moving parts and we don't know what, you know, we have such little information until you get so deep into the budget process, and then we get reactive to it. But I think that now that we can breathe a little bit from passing our current budget, we know it's going to be certainly a challenge again next year. And so I just feel that if we can bring the school committee members into the process, let them listen to them, let them listen to us earlier in the process. And the other thing is that we keep talking about, you know, we can't do it all through a 2.5% levy on the taxes, and we need to involve our legislatures, but we never have had really the luxury of time to sit down and proactively have any of those conversations. And I know that after 2 years ago, when there was even less communication, we made a lot of strides in that direction, and I know that now the town administrators get together with the school administration and proactively have some conversations, but I just feel that we could continue to develop that. And I don't know if you have thoughts, Rebecca, as to if, how, when we can involve the finance board in conversations with the state legislators, or other ways that we can kind of try to really get ahead of what the big drivers and the big issues really are.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because that was something that we've been trying to establish more with the select board as well, because it's something that's been lacking. And I know one of the newer select board members had mentioned, you know, when do we ever really have a conversation with our representatives and senators? So I invited both the senator and the representative to the next select board meeting, so they will be attending to give like a legislative update. So what they had advocated as part of their budgets, as we know it hasn't been finalized on the state level, but they'd be able to talk a little bit more about what they advocated for, why they advocated for it, whether or not there's any initiatives that they were focused on. So attending that meeting might be a good start there if there's anybody who's interested specifically, but the finance board as its own, I wonder if it's more something that maybe we do a follow-up with the legislative delegation in like the fall timeframe, to let them know of our priorities and kind of invite them when you're going through and starting to get ready for the budget, and we're starting to look at some of our forecasted revenue numbers, et cetera. So I'm not sure exactly what the right answer is, but I agree with you. And I think that, like I had mentioned, that member had mentioned the same type of thing. And so we are trying to bring them more into our realm so that we can hear more from them and have more of a direct conversation, instead of like, oh, I talked to so-and-so on this date, or I saw them at this event. Like now it's like an open meeting so that all the residents can hear, and those who are watching can participate as well. So I'm not sure exactly if that's kind of what you're looking for.
I
but-
think that would be helpful to be, you know, to know that they're going to be meeting with the board, the select board, and if I'm available, I would be happy to come in and just be here for that part of the conversation. But yeah, I hear from the school administration that the superintendents get together, they meet with the legislators, and I just feel, even if it's not going to change really the entire landscape, every little bit counts. And you know, you see the way that we're trying to squeeze, we couldn't, we found that we had to adjust the budget by $8,000 in the 11th hour, and it was really hard to do that. So the more we can get the legislators involved and hopefully get some traction, I think that would be at least worth a try.
Is the school committee vacancy been filled?
Yeah, with a write-in at the election.
Right.
I do know we had those liaisons, and I believe that Lana DeRocher was our liaison that was assigned to us by the school committee, and she had been attending a couple of the select board meetings when we had some tense conversations about potential overrides and things of that nature, and we also had them present when we were talking about the Whittier School capital improvement projects that were being proposed. So it could be something where we start to initiate those conversations earlier and see whether or not that she might, or if they're going to reassign liaisons, if they want to come, whether it be the new school committee member or have Lana introduce this new school committee or member, or if they make this newer committee member the liaison, it might be a great opportunity for the finance board. So we could extend an invitation if the board wanted to see whether or not they'd come in maybe at a meeting towards the end of the summer or the fall, when we start to kick off, you know, capital improvement plan and again, revenue forecasting, et cetera. So it might be an opportunity there as well.
Yeah, I think the sooner the better. I think that, you know, the more there's any level of relationship built where we can have conversations, then it can't hurt.
I would agree. Do we want to shoot for a specific meeting to invite them in? We could do like the September one if we thought, like once the school session is back in, because I don't know that they meet quite so frequently over the summer.
I don't care, whatever is convenient, doesn't matter to me.
Well, yeah, September might be a good idea if they're not too deep into their budget already.
Right,
We have time to intercede or somehow,
just have the open dialogue,
yeah, before we get the number, at least if we're part of the conversation, it won't be such sticker shock as it has been in the past, you know what I mean?
Correct.
We're kind of forewarned because we were part of it. But until recently, that's a big part of the thing that's lacked, I think, is there's been a school committee, but I'm not sure there's been a financial branch of that committee that involves the 3 towns and the school and said, okay, this is what you're going to spend, how are we going to pay for it? And then come up with a plan that, I mean, I think you guys are basically kind of doing that now with the 3 towns, but I mean, I think that's the key to the puzzle, you know, getting the school district to understand what the towns can reasonably afford to pay without crippling the entire infrastructure of the towns
Right.
that are trying to support it. You know, nobody wins in that situation, right?
Or what the, you know, what's the offset to a certain level of school funding? This is, you know, I know everybody wants to advocate for their priorities, but there is a finite amount of resources.
Yeah, everybody has a special interest, and I
And so
get it,
everybody
but
needs to understand both sides of the equation.
the pie's only so big.
If others think it would be a good idea, I'd love to create some visualizations. We take some public data. I know there's some stuff out there, but I haven't seen exactly what I'm thinking, where you could just filter by what towns pay 70% or more, whatever, you know, put a limit in there for percent of the budget goes to the schools, and light it up on a map. And then you can add layers to that, and you can kind of drill in with percent changes over years. And I have a little template going now, but with some inputs, if anybody thinks it would be helpful, just to guide conversations, it's just no bias on it at all. Just, you know, this is the data, this is our area, this is Massachusetts, and this is where we stand. I'd love to do it.
Data doesn't lie.
Data doesn't lie.
And visual data is, I think, more powerful
Right.
than numerical data. because it really, for the person that's not numerical and it's visual, really is a sharp representation of reality.
Right.
And I think people might be shocked when they see that reality in a graphic form.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
yeah, you need any help? Sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's
Yeah.
good. I like it.
Yeah, cool. Me too.
All right.
Statistics was my favorite class.
We'll get a little email chain going.
Excellent.
All right, perfect.
And I think it's also just helpful too, like that, having that open dialogue, because there were definitely comments that have been made at meetings that we weren't present at in terms of like, not understanding how we can't afford a certain increase. But again, understanding how it's a piece of the pie for us. It's not just the budget as a whole. So again, like.
It's a whopping big piece of the pie.
Right.
But
So a increase to them that's small is a bigger increase to us when it's
proportionately, yes.
60-something% of our budget. So just being able to kind of show that in different types of examples of like, if your budget increases this much, status quo, right? We can only use like what our percentage is for this year, but like this is what would happen to the town budget.
Right.
So I think it's just trying to get that open communication and understanding of how it all plays in together.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, also loosely model what would happen if real estate prices reversed, right? And when would that have an impact? And each town's a little different, but.
So,
I had signed up for a webinar with the Mass Municipal Association, and it was about school funding and the school funding formula. I have the recording of it. I can share that. Might be helpful.
There's actually someone out there that can explain the school budget formula. Oh, this I gotta see. This should be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize.
I think it's much easier when you're talking about a single district versus a
The
multi-town.
regional makes it hard.
That's where it starts to get convoluted.
Yeah, it gets really muddy at that point, let me tell you.
Okay, so I'll work with Rebecca to figure out a timing to extend an invite in for the school committee. They can kind of decide whether all three members want to come in, if they want to have the liaison come in, whatever extent that will be, and then maybe you guys, it was a little subset of like data gathering and
Sure.
something we can bring back at some point prior to
Yeah.
meeting
And
with them.
maybe show some future impact based on different scenarios,
Sure. Absolutely.
so really give them
Planning, that's all it is.
well, reality. I mean, this is the reality that's going to be the burden of this town, based on this scenario or that scenario. Are you prepared to, lose this, that, or the other thing in order to fund this, that, or the other thing? Or how do we rearrange the, all the blocks on the table to make it all work?
Right.
Because we know it's coming. It's inevitable. I don't think the growth in this town is substantial enough at this point or any time in the future that I can see that's going to be able to absorb 3% or more in an increase in the school budget year over year, over year, over year, over year, over year, without penalties or consequences. I mean, I'm the eternal optimist, but I'm also a realist. You gotta face the facts.
Great. Okay. So then, if we move on, the next item is the approval of the minutes that Ruth sent out. We have both the April 29th meeting and the May 15th.
Holy cow, you flew through
Meeting.
this friggin' thing, huh?
We did.
You awesome.
Quick and easy tonight. So for the April 29th meeting, Adam, obviously you would abstain from both of these. I think everyone else was at that meeting.
Move to approve the April 29, 2024 meeting.
I will second that. there any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
So 5 yes, 1 abstain. And then the next meeting is the May 15th, 2024 meeting. Bill, you were not at that meeting,
No, but I was at a great baseball game.
so do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve the May 15th, 2024 meeting notes.
Okay, and I will second that. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So that's 4 and 2
Abstain.
abstain. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the town administrator updates.
Thank you. So I just have 2 financial-related items and then 1 non-financial related item, but does have a impact on the community, which I believe that the finance board should be well aware of. So the first is, if you haven't already seen the select board meeting, we had conversations about potential reorganization in the highway department, more specifically because we had our highway superintendent resign from the role. So as part of that, I did an exit interview with the former highway superintendent and learned a little bit why he was leaving us. One of which we know that the salary was a driving factor. The other factor was administrative capacity and support. So if many of you know, a lot of the administration and project management of that role was housed in my office. So I did a lot of the grant writing, a lot of the grant management, the drawdown of the projects, submitting the invoices, contacting the contractors, et cetera, and the highway superintendent would go out and review the work and make sure things were being done accordingly. In some cases, we have a construction manager to do that, so it's not necessarily required that we have the superintendent go out. So we found that there might be potential way for us to enhance our capacity internally that might be a little bit more of a benefit to the town. And as we all know, we have limited Chapter 90 funding that comes in through the department, about $200,000 from the state. We have the Fair Share Apportionment Act, which is about another $140,000. But to pave a road these days, that's one road, like, all in, you know, taking into consideration the paving and grinding and the sidewalks and all of that stuff. So it's not exactly like we can do all that work, but we've experienced a lot of issues with a lot of our roadways, and there's been a lot of feedback from the residents that they're, you know, don't believe that their roads are getting paved in a timely manner and their tax dollars are not going to good use. So as part of that, taking that all into consideration and evaluating the exit interview and the work that's currently being performed by my office, and then also talking internally to the town accountant, the town planner, some of the other departments, even just from, you know, a public safety aspect when we're talking about, you know, weather-related incidents and storms and snow plowing and ice and all that other good stuff. We had proposed a new structure which would put the select board at top, then it would be myself, and then the position that's going to be in my office, the executive coordinator, would do the administrative items of the position currently that the superintendent does. So that would be all of the bills, submitting them through BADAR, tracking them, some of the CBA, the collective bargaining agreements that we have with the unions. You know, a certain amount of allowance goes towards your cell phone and your clothing and tracking that, because that's not really necessarily being tracked by that office, and making sure that we're adhering to those. And in addition to that, they would do the payroll. So the payroll can be very complicated when it gets into the highway department because of all their incentives and because of overtime and whether or not it's snow and ice related or whether it's double overtime or somebody's coming for a foreman. So that would be handled by the executive coordinator position. And then what we would do is we would create a project manager position, and the project manager position would really be the one that would really enhance that capacity that we were talking about earlier. So that person would write all of the grants, and that person would submit the Chapter 90 reimbursements. That person would create a road pavement management plan. They would create a tree maintenance plan. They would create the plans that would allow for effective decision-making to come into play. So it's not so-and-so called and they want this taken down, or so-and-so is complaining and they've called 20 times, so this road's getting paved. So it would be more of a data-driven tool for us to be able to make decisions. So that person would start to put those together. So the day-to-day task would be carried out by the working foreman. We do have a working foreman. He is not only the one directing the projects in the field, but he's in the trenches with the crew doing the actual work. So he would be continuing to do that, and he would work with the project manager in terms of developing those plans, the pavement management plans, the drainage, the tree maintenance, and giving input and insight into what he's seeing in the field. And then the executive coordinator would also help with the public and the residents that call. So if somebody calls about a tree, we're starting to track that, so we can start to do work orders. So a lot of the things that you see in other communities is like a see-click fix, where you spot a pothole and you can go online and click, oh, there's a pothole on Center Street, and then it gets logged, and then we put it into a system and it gets prioritized based upon what they're doing. And if they're out patching, they become more aware of what areas they need to focus on based upon the input of the community. So the executive coordinator position would help get all of those inquiries into a system of that nature, because unfortunately that type of software costs a lot of money. But we can be creative about how we do something like that internally, and that person would help develop that as well. So there would be a person in the office that you can go stop in and see, call, and that will respond to you, and then work closely with the project manager as well as the working foreman to make sure that those other inquiries and things are being carried out. So the only thing is that the discipline and the employee performance will be managed by myself. We cannot have the working foreman take part in any of those types of duties because of the collective bargaining agreement. And then also the project manager would not oversee those positions. Those positions would fall under myself and ultimately the select board as the appointing authority. So this is a completely budget neutral change, because we have already set the budget for fiscal year '25. We did not want to add any more monies to the budget. Obviously, we don't really have monies to take from, and it would take an active town meeting to go and figure out how we could do this. But this solution gives us an ability to, one, maximize my capacity as well, because I'm doing a lot of these duties myself anyway, and then also give that department more from a financial aspect, because then they can start to be more creative with the grant funding, because there's a lot of different opportunities. Chapter 90 can fund about anything, engineering, roads, anything in relation to roadways. So with the Complete Streets program, which we saw that did the sidewalks over on Route 97, that's a good program. You could couple that in with a Chapter 90 project for paving, and then you could couple that in with, a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant, which we've received, which could do drainage. And so now you have a project where you're only spending $50,000 of your Chapter 90 funds, and you've covered another, $200,000 in 2 other grant programs. But that's not something that you can just, all right, it's done. You have to plan, you have to strategize, you have to advocate, and you have to see how it all works together. So that's really what that project manager would do, and I think it would be extremely effective. So we're very excited to see that the board approved that at their meeting on Monday. So we will be advertising the project manager position, and we'll go through the candidate process, and we'll see what happens. And hopefully we'll find somebody shortly, because it's a lot of work without having anybody in that role currently. The other financial item I wanted to bring to your attention is the pay-as-you-throw. And I know that the board member, Bill O'Neill, sits on the Trash and Recycling Committee, and maybe he can speak a little bit about this as well. But the committee had put forward the initiative of trying to aid in our struggles with the trash budget. As we all know, it continues to grow. It's not something that just is unique to Groveland. There's no magical contract that's going to come in and that number is not going to go down. Tipping fees all over the state of Massachusetts have increased substantially. We actually have a lower tipping fee. The reason that our contract looks larger than others is because we started off with a smaller increase when we signed our renewal with Waste Management for our 5-year contract. So it was back heavy. So essentially the end years of the contract are a lot higher than what you saw in the beginning, which is making it seem like it's a larger hit, when in reality that's how it was negotiated. That being said, that's not necessarily right. So how can we mitigate this impact on our budget? Because as we talked about with the Pawtucket Regional School District, trash is another budget buster where it's unsustainable. We continue to chase this just unbeatable pile of money that's just not there. So the Trash and Recycling Committee has been trying to figure out ways that we can minimize the impact, or at least try and see how we can make it a little bit more feasible with our operating budget. So we have discussed pay-as-you-throw. We had applied for a grant with Mass DEP for a MAC coordinator, and that person will be designated specifically to the town of Groveland, and they will help us figure out what a pay-as-you-throw program looks like, what are the benefits, how it would be structured, what it would do, and then we would be able to see whether or not the town wanted to move forward in that direction. There's a lot of confusion about what that means in terms of a pay-as-you-throw. You still have to have a hauling and disposal contract. It's not as though you don't have to pay people to come in and take away your trash. You still have to. all that a pay-as-you-throw does is it deters the homeowners from having excessive amounts of trash. So that's good for two reasons. One, because the less the tonnage we have, the lower budget we need for, or the lower allocation we need towards that. Two, it's from an environmental standpoint, the landfills, and there's more science behind that, but essentially, the less trash you have, the better off we're doing. So this program would then be charged for the bag, and the bag would be something that the resident would pay for, and then that monies would go back into our budget to help fund the trash budget. So it's not,
Offset. He's not
yes,
gonna
to
fund
offset, but it's not like the monies are gonna go away. The monies are still there. You still need to pay for those figures. It's just that the amount of money coming out of the operating budget is less because you're not subsidizing your neighbor who throws away 20 bags of trash as
It's like
opposed
a
to you
user
as a
fee.
two. Yes.
It's like implementing user fees.
Exactly. So we're exploring that option. Nothing's been approved as of yet. We're just doing our due diligence. It may not be for Groveland. It wasn't for Boxford when they went through that process, and that's fine. But I think that it's a really great step that we're at least exploring that option, because as we see with the budget, I mean, I think it's 823,000, I think, around that. But next year, we're going to get close to $1 million. And we did talk to Waste Management about opening up the contract and trying to move towards an automated system, which would bring the contract down. But some of the proposals that they submitted were not ideal in terms of some of the other costs that they would be including in potential negotiations for longer-term contracts that we need to take into consideration. But because it has a financial impact on the operating budget, I did want to bring it up to the Finance Board, and I don't know if Bill has anything to add as a committee member who's participated in those conversations.
Are we looking at fixed barrels? Like any towns and cities, you get one barrel for this, you get one barrel for that, and then if you want an extra barrel, you pay. Are they looking at that?
So we have a 2-barrel minimum right now. You either have two,
Maximum.
sorry, yeah, a maximum, not minimum, yes.
Easy there.
Yes,
You're
correct.
trying to
So
curb
we have
that
a
budget.
235 gallon,
232 gallon,
and then one, or
and
one.
then as much recycle as you want.
But no one's enforcing it.
But no one enforces it.
So why would they enforce the new one? I mean,
Why what?
why would the new method? Because no one's enforcing it now.
Well, you see, that's always one of the biggest difficulties in what we did, because we don't have the staff here in town to run around and check everybody's barrels, obviously.
So it won't be
And there's no incentive from a for-profit company to leave tonnage on the street and not, yeah, it'd be like a lawyer refusing to pick up the call, knowing that for every quarter hour, it's cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. So, right now, the Fox does kind of guard the head house, and they're on an honor system, but, it just, we don't have the resources here to police it.
Well,
The
there are
only
3
thing
or 4
is if you,
barrels going out.
But we did talk with Waste Zero, which is the company that does our overflow bags now, and they have a new program where they put cameras on the trucks. And so they are able to see what trash bags go in there. So if we have our purple bags, and there's the camera on top of the
I have
truck.
never seen a purple bag.
But if that's the case, and you do a pay-as-you-throw, and you see the purple bag, the camera would be able to identify that it's not a bag, so it will circle it, and then because each trash bin, if we do the automated system, will have a code on it, you would be able to identify what location you're at. So you would be able to take a closer look at that and be more enforceable. Is there a way not to be? I mean, obviously, it's not, foolproof. There's obviously always a way that something's going to get by, but it's more than what we're doing now, and like Bill said, what's the incentive other than us telling them that they have to? It doesn't mean that they are. But this would give us an opportunity to have it on record that this household is not throwing away the bag, so therefore do we provide them the trash pickup. So there are ways that the committee has been discussing how to more effectively enforce this.
without using limited resources we have in the town. Trying to use other people's money and other people's resources, and to leverage that as best as we can for the benefit of the town and the taxpayers and the residents. But it's a very difficult
Have you
scale.
guys talked to West Newbury on why the reasons they went to a fixed barrel system?
How does that work for multifamilies now? Do they have a different allotment? Can they track all that?
It would get the same, it would be by the, so each unit would have
Yeah.
a barrel.
Okay, okay.
And that,
Sorry.
yeah, every unit would have one trash barrel and one recycle barrel.
Yep, so it just multiplies,
Yeah, and as long as the lid closes,
and they'd be able to track that within the system.
the advantage to the contractor is it reduces his labor costs because the driver never leaves the vehicle.
Right.
But there's a cost to getting those bins,
Right.
you know, so, again,
Right.
it's a balancing act between what you can afford to spend, what's the return on your investment, you know, how long that is, and, you know, how do you fund it if it's, you know, makes sense.
And the driver right now is weight, not volume, for the cost?
The cost, well, there's a tipping charge,
Yep.
no matter what, and then there's a cost based on tonnage.
Okay.
The more tonnage that we dispose of, and then there's, you know, I've found out, I've got a great education that recycle isn't perfect. You know, 6 months ago, I took the pizza boxes and I chucked them in the recycle bin. And now I found out that, you know, the bottom of it has this tiny little microscopic piece of oil. It gets chucked out, rejected, and then we get like a surcharge for the rejection of the recycle. And the recycle used to be a source of revenue. Now it's just another cost because no one will take it. So it ends up in landfills. Very little of it is actually recycled and reprocessed and put back into the, you know, world. Now I tear my pizza boxes up, but, you know, trying to educate all the rest of us is, you know, that's a chore in and of itself. You know, what is basically recyclable that won't cost us at the end of the day in surcharges because it was rejected as being contaminated.
Right.
So, I mean, some things I'm just learning, so I don't know how the general public would even know.
I knew that.
It's the brochure. You get the brochure, if it's not in there,
It's hard.
you forget. Right?
And
So once we have that MAC coordinator come in, we could potentially have them meet either virtually or in person with the finance board as well. When we start to go through that process, it might be beneficial for the board to partake in that conversation, at least from, again, the financial sense of what the savings would be, how the savings could be attributed, what would we still be paying for, that kind of thing, and provide further education. So stay tuned for that. So that should be coming. And then the last item that I just wanted to bring your attention, that's not necessarily finance related, but is finance related, is that we are going to be beginning the process for the MBTA Communities Act. So I know that you've all heard that phrase. It has that negative connotation that nobody wants to touch with a 10-foot pole. But we are going to need to comply with the regulations that have come down. So we have received a grant, a community planning grant with the state, and we have hired Inez Associates, which is the consultant that we've used for our comprehensive master plan. And she also worked with us for 150 Center Street feasibility study on the zoning side of things. So she's fantastic. She's very familiar with Groveland. I think a few of you have met her, so we're excited that she'll be back. She's going to be doing a kickoff meeting with the select board on the 24th, kind of like a boot camp 101 kind of thing, like an introductory MBTA zoning. What is it? What do we need to do? What's been done thus far? And next steps. So at that point, we'll have more details about moving forward and where the town planner, myself, and others in departments have identified locations that we believe would comply with what the regulations are and what draft zoning would look like, because it is not necessarily a production plan, so we don't have to produce any housing. This does not mean that we have to produce any housing. It just means that we have to have zoning in place that allows for that housing. And as we know, zoning really dictates what you get for a development. So because we're an adjacent community, we need to allow for a minimum of 130 dwelling units at a minimum density of 15 units per acre. So we will be taking a closer look at what that looks like The districts don't necessarily have to be contiguous, so they could be spread out on different areas of the community. But there are strict regulations in place that don't allow for restrictions. So you can't just restrict it to 65 and older. You do have to make sure that it's available to all. So there's other things that come into play with the zoning regulations that we will need to make sure. And another thing that I like to point out is that a lot of people get confused as to MBTA. We don't have a train station, and we don't have a, where does the train come from? Or like, is it the MEVA bus or the MVRTA bus, as you might know it? No, it's neither one of those. It's classified as an adjacent small town because it has less than 100 acres of developable station area or either a density of less than 500 persons per square mile or a year-round population of less than 7,000. So it really is because of the fact that we're within vicinity of a commuter station and the MBTA and those types of regional transportation options that are available to us.
Would those all be 40B type buildings?
So they won't be, from my understanding, there's no affordability component. So it has to provide at least one district of reasonable size multifamily housing as of right, which is the zoning, so you would be able to apply and receive. Cannot have age restrictions and shall be suitable for families with children, so you can't make the argument that the school system's overburdened. And you couldn't really make that argument anyway because our enrollment is down. And then must have a minimum gross density of 15 dwelling units per acre. And part of the district must be located within 0.5 miles from a commuter rail, subway, ferry, or bus station as applicable. So, I mean, you could argue the MEVA bus would be a bus route, but that's not necessarily the same as your MBTA commuter stations. So those are some of the things that are required. So it's just something that's coming before us. It's something that we'll need to do. I know many of you have seen the articles come through. I know that there's a couple of communities that have filed lawsuits and that are moving forward. I think one of the most insightful comments I did hear is that, it's a difficult time, and it's an interesting approach by the state to take such actions. We've never really had them come at us in this type of form where they're mandating that we do something of this nature. So I think a lot of communities are a little bit taken aback, and while the idea that housing is necessary, I don't think anyone can say that that's not the case. It's just how they're going about it and the way that they're not really allowing us to be part of the conversation and telling us what to do. And I think that makes it really hard for people to get their minds around. So it'll be an interesting conversation. But I think that what I mean by it is that one of the things that other communities have said is that we could spend tons of money, like not proceeding with meeting the compliance. We could hire attorneys and lawyers and things of that nature, and by doing so we're using taxpayer dollars to fight this. Or we could move forward and try and do zoning to the best of our abilities and pass a zoning bylaw, and then if one of those communities who is suing the state and fighting it wins, then we go to town meeting and we retract our zoning.
And hire those lawyers.
But you can do that, but you know what I mean? You would be able to say at town meeting that we want to not go forward with that zoning. You don't have to, you can change zoning any time at town meeting. It's not like you have to live and die by the zoning. You just have to make sure it gets the right approval process, which is through town meeting. So that's something to take into consideration, is that you're going to spend a lot of money fighting something where the current threats that are, or not the threats, the current negatives that are being proposed is that we don't get to apply for funding. So, the $1 million culvert we just got to replace, we wouldn't get $1 million. We wouldn't be able to talk about Complete Streets, the MVP program, and all these other, grants that we've been receiving, which would be very awful for a community like Groveland because we don't have much resources that we have from our operational budget. So we depend on this funding, and to take that away from us would limit our ability to be effective. So it is just something to take into consideration. And however the town wants to proceed, the town at town meeting will be the one to ultimately vote. And you've seen in other communities fail that. So we do get another bite at the apple. So the idea is to get it approved at 2025 annual town meeting. And then if it does not pass, we still are able to hold a fall town meeting, special town meeting, to see if it would pass then. And then we would be cut off by the December 2025 deadline. So we are giving ourselves a little bit of room, but there's been a lot of, pushback, and it's been a very controversial topic, and it's even just controversial when you just think of the general nature of what they're doing. But at the same time, they obviously feel as though the need for housing meets the necessary threshold for them to push as hard as they are. So I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that we are going to be beginning in that process, and that the select board will be starting that process on their June 24th meeting with the consultant, Emily Inez, and whatever information that I receive, I will be forwarding to the finance board so that you're informed, so that you have all the information when things start to progress.
So if I own, say, 20 acres, I'm an owner of the land, and it's zoned for business, we can just rezone that to be residential?
We would be, yes, we would do an overlay zone that would allow it to be towards the zoning that's required under the MBTA.
So the owner of that land would have no control.
It would be as of rights, so they would be able to zone. That's why they're not allowing you to do town property. So 150 Center, that's a town-owned property. So some people have tried to use their town-owned properties as ways to put in their district, and the state is pushing back, saying that, well, you have no intention to ever get rid of that land, so you know you can't put that as your part of your district. So there are a lot of different things that are coming into this conversation that, you know, people trying to work around it and be creative, and it's been very eye-opening.
I think one thing to point out is if you were the landowner, it doesn't force you to develop. So you would still own your 20 acres,
I
and
know,
you are
but
free to do what you want
You're
with
changing the
it.
nature of it.
It's not changing the nature of your ownership.
Well, it
It's
could drop
changing-
the value of my property, okay?
Or increase it,
Building. Maybe.
because now that person has the ability to create those units, and now your vacant land has units on it, which
We'll
makes
see how well
money.
the state does with the town of Milton. Okay? They've got money. Okay? So,
But the chair is correct. Even if your property is zoned, it does not mean you have to create it. It's just if you sell it, or if you wanted, somebody else wanted to, they would have the ability to do that as of right per the zoning.
Is it an expensive process to go through that rezoning?
The process is town meeting, so it would need to go through the planning board. The planning board would need to approve any zoning change, and then it would go to town meeting for, I believe, a 2/3 vote.
So all the prep that goes into it, though, it's all manageable.
Yes,
That's what you're saying,
and
yeah.
we have a consultant to help us with that. Like I said, Emily's fantastic. She actually helped write the model bylaws for the state, so she's very familiar with what is required and what we need to do, which is really important, because obviously we don't want to miss anything, and we want to make sure that we're meeting compliance. We don't need to exceed compliance on this one, but we need to at least meet the compliance so that we're, you know, following the law. And those are all my updates, sorry.
It's okay.
I got 3 questions.
Yep.
So going back to the project manager, the cost savings or cost overrun for this, for fiscal 2025 will be net zero.
Yes.
Will there be a cost savings for fiscal 2026 due to, with this change?
I would believe it would be this, it would still be the same as if you had a superintendent.
So if we still had a superintendent there and increased the salary by 2.5%,
Exactly.
it's still going to be net zero for this,
For fiscal year '26,
for
correct?
fiscal year 26.
Exactly. So employee salaries are hard. I mean, if you want to give a 2% cost of living increase, then that person would be eligible for a 2% cost of living increase. So I couldn't say what it's going to be FY '26, because I don't have the authority to set cost of living increase, but I would assume that if you're granting that to other employees, you would, and therefore that wouldn't be a net neutral, you're correct.
Okay.
But current FY '25, there is no change to that bottom line. If anything, hopefully, if we hire a project manager that might be a little less experienced, but still capable and competent, then we might have a savings in that.
Yeah, I agree. No changes to this unless we have a car wash and a bake sale. How much is the grant that you're talking about from the MBTA?
What was it, I'm sorry?
How much is the grant worth? You were talking about the MBTA Community Act. How much do we get for that?
So for the community grant for the
Study for this woman.
consultant, we received, I believe it was a little over, I don't want to speak out of turn, it's just loading. And naturally, very slowly.
Okay, while you're waiting for that, and you may not know the answer to this, you talked about multifamily units. Is there a stipulation that they must be owner-occupied, these multifamily units?
No.
No. So, basically, they'll just be rentals.
Yes.
130 of them,
Yes.
rentals.
And the grant award was for $95,000.
All right, thank you.
Rebecca, I'm going to bounce back to the trash for a second, because I believe the town put out, I think it was today, the composting opportunity that looks to be coming to town, which in effect could help reduce the amount of trash that's going out.
That's correct.
There are a number of people interested in composting and this service that they would choose to pay for. Takes more than just what you can put in your own at-home compost. It takes a lot more. It takes like bones and things that you compost on your own. So that is a potential for residents as well.
That's correct. And we are applying for a grant that would allow for the starter kit and the cost of the container to be at no cost to those looking to participate. We wouldn't be able to pay the annual fee for the pickup because of disposal and hauling kind of thing, but we would be able to help you get started, and that was hopefully will generate some interest.
And there are other things, I jumped on the webpage really quick. They also offer like leave and yard waste pickup at a per cost thing. So if that was an interest to somebody, there are other options that they offer as well, so.
Well, the leaves and things like that have always been an option. Take it down to the town, I guess you'd call it the city yards, right?
Yeah.
And dump it there for free, which, you know.
Not everyone has the ability to transport it, so.
Yeah, neither. Yeah, I mean, it's not always easy, but it's free.
Yeah. So, I just wanted to mention that because that is something that, I think you guys just put it out today or something like that, so. Does anyone have anything else on anything?
I do.
Yeah.
I had one thing that I just wanted to mention, and that is that I don't really know the details of it. All I know is what I saw when I watched the Board of Selectmen meeting 2 weeks ago, but there was some confusion at the annual town meeting where, when we first got to the town meeting, I saw 2 of our police officers there. Usually, I always see Chief Gillen at that meeting, and he wasn't there. There were 2 other officers there. Later in the meeting, they were not there, and then there was some conversation about it at the Board of Selectmen meeting, that for some reason they were asked to leave. And I think that's been rectified. The Board of Selectmen said that they should be there, they want them there, but I just wanted to point out that from my perspective, I really value having town departments at our town meeting, whether they're residents of our town or not. They're part of our town and part of the budget process. And I think it's a opportunity for town departments to interact with the public. I think that a year ago at our town meeting, there was a really great question by a resident about the doors that were being installed at the elementary school and why do these doors cost so much money? It was a great question because I don't remember how much they were, but it was a large amount of money. And the police chief was there, who had a great opportunity to connect with the residents and the taxpayers and explain why this was an issue for him, why it was a priority. He did a great job answering the question, and I think he also did a great job just conveying a sense of who he is to the town and to the departments. And so I think it's really important that we embrace any town employee to be at that meeting and to have an opportunity to answer questions for their own budget, because we do our best to meet with everybody, but I can represent people. There was a question about police vehicles versus fire vehicles at that meeting, and I just want to encourage that is a place where everybody, including the town employees, have an opportunity to represent themselves and interact with all of the departments and, most importantly, the residents and the taxpayers. That's my thought on that. Thank you.
Anyone have anything else? Okay, so the next agenda item is to plan the next meeting, which we had already tentatively set for July 10th at 6 PM. And this would allow us to approve any transfers that may come up between now and year end that need to be approved by July 15th. So if we can just make sure we have that on our calendars. And then, if anyone has anything that they wanted to talk about real quick, otherwise we are free to adjourn. Everyone good? Okay. So we can make the motion to adjourn at 6:57.
Motion to adjourn at 6:57 PM.
I'll second that motion.
All right, great. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Thank you, everyone.